Imagine standing in complete darkness. Your life has come to an end. Every choice you've ever made, every lie, every act of kindness is about to be judged. Before you stands a silent king wrapped in white linen. His skin is green. His crown is unlike any worn by a pharaoh. He does not speak. He simply watches for more than 3,000 years. The ancient Egyptians believed that every soul would one day stand before this god. His name was Osiris. But here's the strange part. He wasn't always the ruler of the dead. In fact, he was once the greatest king the world had ever known. Today, most books describe Osiris as the god of death, but that's actually incorrect. Egyptian texts never called him the god of death. Death belonged to everyone. Osiris ruled something much more important: hope, resurrection, eternal life. That single misunderstanding has survived for centuries. I found an insert from an ancient text in the pyramid texts. The deceased king doesn't pray to avoid death. He prays to become Osiris. Here's where history becomes fascinating. Archaeologists have discovered thousands of inscriptions mentioning Osiris, yet no one knows exactly when his worship began. There is no single moment when Osiris suddenly appears. Instead, his cult slowly spreads across Egypt, as though the people themselves created him over centuries. If there was one city every Egyptian dreamed of visiting, it was Abydos. Long before the pyramids became famous, Abydos was already considered holy. Millions believed Osiris himself had been buried there. Even pharaohs wanted monuments built near his sacred tomb because they believed the closer they rested to Osiris, the closer they would be to eternal life. But here's the mystery. Archaeologists have never found the actual tomb of Osiris. Instead, they discovered something even stranger. Every major temple claimed to possess a piece of him. How could one god have dozens of burial places? The answer lies in a story that changed Egyptian religion forever. According to the oldest legends, Egypt was not always a kingdom of temples and pharaohs. There was a time when people wandered the Nile Valley without laws, without organized farming, and without written traditions. Then came Osiris. Ancient priests believed he taught humanity how to cultivate grain, establish justice, and build the foundations of civilization. Whether this was history or symbolism, the message was clear. Civilization itself was considered a divine gift. One detail often surprises modern readers. Osiris wasn't only linked to the afterlife, he was also the god of grain. Every year, farmers watched seeds disappear beneath the soil. Days later, green shoots emerged. To the Egyptians, that wasn't just agriculture, it was Osiris dying and being reborn. The annual flooding of the Nile shaped every aspect of Egyptian life. When the waters receded, rich black soil remained behind. Crops flourished, food returned. To the Egyptians, this yearly cycle mirrored the story of Osiris himself. Death was never the end. It was the beginning of renewal. Under Osiris, the legends describe a world without famine, without war, and without injustice. He ruled beside his queen, Isis. Together, they became the model of the perfect king and queen. But perfection rarely lasts. While Egypt celebrated its golden age, one figure watched from the edge of the desert. He saw the temples, the harvests, the people's devotion, and with every passing year, his resentment grew. His name was Seth. The greatest betrayal in Egyptian mythology was about to begin. Ancient Egyptian mythology rarely describes its villains as purely evil. Seth was different. He represented the scorching desert, violent storms, foreign lands, and the unpredictable forces of chaos. To the Egyptians, chaos was not unnecessary. Without it, order had no meaning. But balance only existed when neither side became too powerful. As Osiris united Egypt under peace and prosperity, Seth believed the world was becoming weak, or perhaps he simply wanted the throne for himself. Ancient texts never tell us exactly why, and that mystery remains unsolved even today. According to the Greek writer Plutarch, Seth did not act alone. He recruited 72 conspirators. But why 72? Egyptologists still debate the meaning. Some believe it represented political factions. Others think it symbolized cosmic disorder. The truth has been lost for more than 2,000 years, yet the number survived the myth itself. Instead of declaring war, Seth organized a celebration. Music echoed through the palace. Servants carried wine from table to table. Laughter filled the hall. Nothing seemed unusual. At the center of the room rested an exquisitely crafted cedar chest, covered in gold, decorated with lapis lazuli, beautiful enough to be a royal treasure, deadly enough to change history forever. Seth stood before his guests and made an unusual offer. Whoever fit perfectly inside the chest could keep it. One by one, the guests climbed inside. Some were too tall, others too short. The room filled with laughter. Then Osiris stepped forward. The moment Osiris lay inside, everything changed. Seth's followers slammed the lid shut. Heavy bolts locked into place. Molten lead was poured over the seams. The celebration vanished. The conspiracy had succeeded. Egypt's greatest king had disappeared without a battle. Under the cover of darkness, the conspirators carried the sealed chest to the Nile. The river that had given Egypt life would now carry away its king. As the chest drifted downstream, the people knew nothing. Their ruler had vanished, and by morning, chaos had already begun. When Isis discovered what had happened, she refused to accept that the story was over. She abandoned the palace, removed her royal ornaments, and began one of the longest journeys in Egyptian mythology. Ancient hymns describe her wandering from village to village, asking strangers if they had seen a mysterious chest floating down the river. According to later traditions, the chest did not remain in Egypt. It crossed the Mediterranean until it reached the ancient city of Byblos. Today, Byblos lies in modern Lebanon. This small detail reveals something remarkable. Egyptian myths were no longer confined to Egypt. They had already become international stories. Here, the story becomes almost unbelievable. The chest lodged beside a young tamarisk tree. As the years passed, the tree continued to grow until it completely surrounded the chest. To the Egyptians, nature itself was protecting their king. The tree became so magnificent that the ruler of Byblos ordered it cut down and transformed into a palace pillar. Guided only by determination, Isis finally reached Byblos, but she did not reveal who she truly was. Instead, she entered the royal court as a humble foreign woman. Patiently, she waited, because hidden inside one of the palace columns was the body of Osiris. And what she would do next would become one of the most famous moments in all of Egyptian mythology. The palace of Byblos was admired across the eastern Mediterranean. Its greatest treasure wasn't gold or precious stones. It was a towering cedar pillar unlike any other. No one inside the palace knew that hidden within its heart rested the body of a murdered god. According to Egyptian tradition, nature itself had preserved Osiris until Isis could find him. Whether the story is literal or symbolic, the cedar became a powerful image of death giving birth to new life. Egyptian texts describe Isis not as a warrior, but as the cleverest of all the goddesses. Instead of demanding the pillar, she entered the palace quietly. Her wisdom impressed Queen Astarte. Soon, Isis became one of the royal household. She waited patiently because she knew the right moment would eventually come. Isis carried the body back to Egypt, but the story wasn't over. Ancient Egyptian religion placed enormous importance on funerary rituals. A proper burial ensured that the soul could continue its journey. Without those rites, eternal life was impossible. This belief would shape Egyptian civilization for more than 3,000 years. Historical context. Modern Egyptologists believe myths like this helped explain why burial rituals became so central to Egyptian culture. While Isis prepared the sacred burial, Seth was hunting beneath the light of the full moon. By chance, he discovered the hidden tomb. What happened next shocked even the ancient Egyptians, furious that Osiris might still be honored. Seth committed an act unlike anything seen before in mythology. Ancient sources differ on the exact number, but many claim Seth cut the body of Osiris into 14 pieces, then scattered them across Egypt. It wasn't simply an act of rage. In Egyptian belief, destroying the body threatened a person's chance at eternal life. Seth believed if no body remained, Osiris could never return. Historians have proposed another fascinating idea. The scattered pieces of Osiris may never have represented a literal body. Instead, they may symbolize the many temples across Egypt that claimed a special connection to him. Each city preserved its own tradition. Each believed it guarded a part of the great god. In this way, myth became geography. Once again, Isis refused to surrender. Joined by her sister Nephthys, she traveled the length of the Nile, temple by temple, marsh by marsh, desert by desert, searching for every missing piece. Their journey became one of the most enduring symbols of love and devotion in Egyptian mythology. When the search was complete, Anubis entered the story. Together, he and Isis performed sacred rituals over the body of Osiris. According to Egyptian tradition, this became the first act of mummification. Every mummy created afterward followed the example of Osiris. The king of the dead had become the first to conquer death itself. The rituals were complete. The prayers had been spoken. The body had been restored. Then, according to one of Egypt's greatest myths, Osiris opened his eyes once more, but he did not return to rule the living. Instead, something even more extraordinary happened. He became the eternal king of the world beyond death. And before he left, he would father a son whose destiny would change Egypt forever. Osiris could no longer rule the world of the living, but before leaving forever, he left behind an heir, his son, Horus. According to Egyptian mythology, Horus was conceived after the resurrection of Osiris. To modern audiences, the story sounds impossible, but to the Egyptians, it proves something extraordinary. Death was not always the end. Even the grave could not stop the divine bloodline. The future king of Egypt had been born. One detail often goes unnoticed. Isis didn't raise Horus in a palace. She hid him deep within the marshes of the Nile Delta. Those wetlands were almost impossible to navigate. Dense reeds, hidden waterways, dangerous wildlife, the perfect place to disappear. To ancient Egyptians, the marshes represented both danger and protection. The legends say Seth never stopped searching. Some versions claim he sent wild animals. Others describe venomous snakes and deadly scorpions. One ancient spell tells of young Horus being poisoned. Isis desperately called upon the gods, and according to the myth, the child lived. These stories were so important that Egyptians later copied them onto magical healing stelae used to protect children from snake bites. This part of the story isn't only mythology. Archaeologists have uncovered dozens of healing monuments, known today as Sipi of Horus. These stone tablets show the young god standing on crocodiles, holding snakes and scorpions. Egyptians poured water over the carvings, then drank the water, believing it carried Horus's divine protection. Some of these monuments survive to this day. Years passed, hidden from Seth. Horus became a warrior. Ancient Egyptian artists often portrayed him as a falcon, not because he literally was one, but because falcons ruled the sky. Their unmatched vision, speed, and precision made them the perfect symbol of kingship. Every future pharaoh would eventually identify himself with Horus at last. Horus stepped out of hiding. He entered the court of the gods with a single demand. The throne of Egypt belonged to him, not to Seth. What followed wasn't a battle, at least not at first. It became one of the longest legal disputes in mythology. Surprisingly, Egyptian myths describe lawsuits long before sword fights. The gods debated, witnesses were questioned, arguments were presented. Some stories claim the dispute lasted 80 years. To the Egyptians, justice mattered as much as strength. Even gods had to obey the law. One detail surprises many historians. The king of the gods did not immediately support Horus. Some ancient texts suggest he admired Seth's strength. Others say he feared another civil war among the gods. Whatever the reason, his hesitation prolonged the conflict for years. During one of their many confrontations, Seth attacked Horus. In the struggle, Horus lost his left eye, but the story didn't end there. The god Thoth restored it. That restored eye became one of the most powerful symbols in human history. The eye of Horus represented healing, wholeness, and protection. More than 5,000 years later, the eye of Horus is still everywhere. It appears on jewelry, tattoos, museum exhibits, and even modern logos. Few people realize they are looking at the symbol of a prince who fought to avenge his father, but the greatest battle was still ahead. The trial had failed. Decades of arguments had settled nothing. According to Egyptian mythology, the conflict between Horus and Seth could no longer be decided by words. It would be decided through combat. Ancient texts describe a series of contests unlike any ordinary battle. They fought on land, upon the Nile, and even transformed themselves into powerful animals. This wasn't simply a struggle between two gods, it was a battle between two visions of the universe, order against chaos. One of the strangest episodes appears in later Egyptian texts. Horus and Seth agreed to transform into hippopotamuses, then remain underwater for 3 months. Whoever surfaced first would lose. To us, it sounds bizarre, but the hippopotamus represented enormous destructive power in ancient Egypt. Even this contest was symbolic. Watching the struggle, Isis could no longer remain silent. She threw a magical harpoon towards Seth, but according to one version of the myth, she accidentally struck Horus instead. Moments later, she freed Seth out of compassion. Horus was furious. The conflict had become more complicated than revenge. It had become a test of justice itself. Some surviving texts claim the dispute lasted 80 years. Imagine an entire lifetime defined by a single unresolved conflict. Egyptian mythology wasn't interested in quick victories. It taught that restoring order could take generations. At last, the Ennead reached its decision. Horus was the rightful heir. Seth would no longer rule Egypt. Instead, he would govern the deserts, storms, and the wild frontiers beyond civilization. Chaos had not been destroyed. It had simply been given its proper place. This decision shaped Egyptian civilization for thousands of years. Every living pharaoh was believed to be the earthly embodiment of Horus, and when that king died, he became Osiris. In other words, every royal succession repeated the greatest myth in Egypt. The kingdom itself became a living ritual. But Osiris had one final role. Every soul, rich or poor, pharaoh or farmer, would eventually stand before his throne. Their heart was placed upon a scale, opposite the feather of Maat. If the heart remained lighter, eternal life awaited. If not, there was no second chance. This wasn't just mythology. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of funerary papyri, tomb paintings, coffins, and temple inscriptions showing exactly this judgment. From ordinary craftsmen to mighty pharaohs, everyone hoped to stand successfully before Osiris. Few religious ideas remained unchanged for so long. Kingdoms collapsed, dynasties vanished, foreign empires conquered Egypt. Yet the story of Osiris survived. Greek historians wrote about him. Roman travelers described his temples. Modern archaeologists continue uncovering new evidence. More than 4,000 years after his cult began, very few gods in human history have remained relevant for so long. Osiris was never simply the god of the dead. He became something far greater, a symbol that life could continue after loss, that justice might outlast violence, that order could return even after chaos seemed to win. Perhaps that's why, after more than 4,000 years, we still remember his name. Because every civilization asks the same question: what happens after death? The ancient Egyptians believed they already knew the answer.